The Bexley Foundation was really nice, and those were what they did.
It was nice you guys came.
I was glad to see that carriage house.
Yeah, that.
It's very nice.
Okay, well, we still may have a few people walking in, but I see a lot of familiar faces. Welcome everyone to our Gramercy Books Author Night. We're featuring best-selling novelist Barbara Shapiro, to share her exciting psychological thriller, Metropolis, with you. And she'll be in conversation with former Dispatch arts editor Nancy Gilson. I'm Linda Cass. For those of you who don't know me, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let me just preview the next hour quickly. It's 35 minutes of conversation that Barbara and Nancy will be having, and then we'll open it up for about 15 or 20 minutes for your questions. And then at the close, I will be doing our drawing. I think you all know there's a drawing for the Art Forger, and Barbara will sign it afterwards along with your copy. So after the program, we'll do the book signing over at our table in front of the bestseller shelves. We thank you for your patience for us checking in vaccinations. We're still doing it. We're trying to be careful. You know, I see some of you wearing masks. Feel free to wear a mask or not. You know, we just want to keep everyone as safe as possible. We're continuing to offer virtual and hybrid and intimate in-person events like tonight for all of you to enjoy, and you know, just want to quickly give you a heads up to upcoming June programs that we're hosting. They're all at 7 o'clock. Friday, June 3rd, in person here again, we are hosting sports writer David Lewis. He's launching his new book featuring Michael Jordan's Secrets to Success, Life Lessons from His Earnest. On Monday, the 13th of June, you can join us virtually. We'll meet acclaimed journalist, scholar, and YA author Marie Mayung-Ok Lee, who launches her debut adult novel, The Evening Hero. So this is Michael Jordan book, and this is Marie's book, The Evening Hero. It's a sweeping lyrical story that follows a Korean immigrant pursuing the American dream, and she's going to be in conversation with master storyteller Gish Jen. And Tuesday, June 21st. I don't have the book with me because it has not come out yet, but you could kick off your summer with the noon luncheon at Giuseppe's Ritrovo, featuring best-selling author Louis Bayard and his delicious new novel, Jackie and Me. It's a brilliantly wrought, witty, and sensitive novel about the young Jacqueline Bouvier before she became that Jackie, and about a marriage that almost didn't happen. And finally, and that's June 21st, all this is on Eventbrite, by the way, and on June 28th, we're going to have an intimate fireside chat without the fireplace with Bexley's very own James Clear, whose Atomic Habits has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 4 years. He is going to be in conversation with the president of his alma mater, Denison University, with Adam Weinberg. And just, you know, Atomic Habits has sold over 7 million copies worldwide and has been translated in more than 50 languages. It's one of the most comprehensive and practical books on habit formation. And James Clear lives right here in Bexley. Yes. Okay, so you can learn more about our author programs on our website and through our e-newsletter, and you can sign up on our website at gramercybooksbexley.com. Or you can just give your email address to Katie or Daniel, who are here tonight. Now on to our program tonight, which I've been so excited about. In her masterful novel of psychological suspense, Barbara Shapiro follows a cast of unforgettable characters whose lives intersect when a harrowing accident occurs at the Metropolis storage warehouse in Cambridge, Massachusetts. 6 mysterious characters who rent units in or are connected to this self-storage facility must now reevaluate their lives. Barbara is the best-selling author of The Collector's Apprentice, The Muralist, and The Art Forger. I believe we have back copies of most of these books here tonight as well. And The Art Forger, she won the New England Book Award for Fiction and the Boston Authors Society Award for Fiction, among other honors. Her books have been selected as community reads in numerous cities and translated throughout the world. Before becoming a novelist, she taught sociology at Tufts University and creative writing at Northeastern University. She and husband Dan divide their time between Boston and Florida, and we are so thrilled to welcome her back to Columbus. Some of you might have seen Barbara in, I think it was 2019, and she came to the Columbus Museum of Art for the Collector's Apprentice, and it was just an outstanding program, so we're just so thrilled that she's back. Moderating tonight's program is Nancy Gilson, and a lot of you know Nancy. After receiving her undergraduate degree in English Literature at Miami University, and her master's in journalism at the Ohio State University, Nancy began her career as a general assignment reporter for the Oklahoma Journal in Oklahoma City. She joined the Columbus Dispatch in 1985. She was the arts editor until she retired from full-time work 5 years ago. And you may have seen Nancy's terrific feature, which I'm going to give Barbara, since we always see everything online, her feature on Barbara that was in the Columbus Dispatch just a week from Sunday, I believe it was. So let's give a warm welcome to Barbara and Nancy.
Thank you. I see such friendly faces out there. It's so nice to meet you. It is a pleasure to do another interview with you. Some of the things that we talked about on the phone before I met you in person and are in the paper will be a little bit repeated tonight. But Barbara was such a great interview. She just, I'd ask a question and she'd go off, and it was, there was so much I couldn't get in the article. So there's lots more to say. First of all, you got to tell us why your byline is B.A. Shapiro and not Barbara Shapiro.
Okay, it is not to hide the fact that I'm a woman, because there's a big picture right on the book. But what happened was I wrote 5 books under Barbara Shapiro, and they were published by major publishers, Avon Books, HarperCollins, but nobody read them. So these were such a long time ago that they went out of print. That was how much they were not read. And then I actually wrote 3 more books that I couldn't get published. And then I wrote the book that turned out to be The Art Forger. And I got a publisher, and they wanted to make it a bigger book. But the first thing that booksellers and librarians look at when a book comes out is your past sales. And Barbara's past sales are really abysmal. So they said, how about take your initials? I said, fine, because I liked it, because B.A. is badass.
I like it. Well, maybe you can revisit those earlier books with another publisher.
Well, they actually are now available through Open Road, which does ebooks and print on demand. But the author on those books is now B.A.
So, Metropolis is such a fun read. And the thing that blew me away was I am completely unfamiliar with storage units. I had no idea people would live in there. So tell us about the genesis for setting your book in a storage unit.
Well, people always ask, where do you get your ideas? And it's really hard to answer because it's a conglomeration of ideas that you have over time. So I had been thinking about the elements in this book for the last 30 years. I had wanted to write a book with an ensemble cast. I read Let the Great World Spin, and I'm like, oh, I really want to do that, where you have these people who don't know each other, but because of a place or a time or an event, they're drawn together. They never would have met each other, and I actually have a PhD in sociology because all writers need a PhD in sociology. And I'd always been interested in class, but not class like the difference between the rich and the poor. Class as in the class that you are born into, your parents' socioeconomic level, has a big effect on where you start, what they call the race of life. And so I really wanted to do something with that. And I always have art in my books. And I had seen this film, Finding Vivian Maier, and she was this fabulous street photographer, but she was enigmatic and very strange and quite possibly mentally ill. And she took the most amazing photographs. So I had these three ideas in my head, but I couldn't figure out a way to put them together. Because, you know, the way we are now, everybody kind of hangs out with the people they know. We don't have a lot of contact with people who are different colors, different socioeconomic levels. And so the ideas were in my head. And then about 4 years ago, I opened up the Boston Globe, and there was an article about Metropolitan, is what it's called, which is a self-storage facility, but it's not like what you see by the highway. It actually is a building that looks something like this. It's 4 stories, big, giant brick building. And they had all of these photographs, and all these different people, and they were in there, and they had all of this bizarre stuff. And it was like, it just hit me. I could set the book there, I get my ensemble cast, I could do something with class because there are rich and poor people, and I'll have one of the characters be a street photographer. And so that's...
And tell us a little bit more about the actual Metropolis, or whatever it's.
It's actually called Metropolitan.
Metropolitan.
But if I called it that, everybody would think it was about the opera, so so I changed the name. So this building was built in the late 19th century, and it was always a storage facility. There actually are railroad tracks that go up next to it, because it used to be people would ship in whatever they were selling, and then they had these units, and they would put their stuff in and then go back and forth and sell it. And at that time, it was strictly just these units. And then it actually sits right across from MIT in Cambridge. And pretty much anybody who lives around Boston has driven past it, which is what everybody keeps telling me now. I always wondered what that building was. So over the years, as more and more people started storing their stuff there, they added heat, they added electricity, air conditioning, because people were storing things like wine or instruments or whatever. And so it was habitable. It's illegal to live there, but as it turns out in my story, there ultimately end up to be 3 people who are living in their units. And the reason they can do it is because the manager, Rose, is taking money under the table to let them do it. And Zach, another character who owns the building, doesn't know anything about this. And yes, people do live in storage units. They're not supposed to, it's completely illegal, but they do. And then I have another character who has his office in the storage unit. You know, it's like all these different ways that people use these spaces. You know, rent is really high in Boston.
Did you get in the actual building?
I couldn't get in because the article was that they were moving out of the building, and MIT had bought it, and they were going to turn it into dorms, except for the fact there are hardly any windows. So it's like, how could they do that? So now they've decided to turn it into lab space, which makes a lot more sense.
So your characters, they're just great, and they're also different as you explained. And talk a little bit about Marta and how how your background figures into her. Marta is the one that is the Venezuelan, is that right?
Yes.
And she's got some immigration problems.
Yes.
And she's writing her thesis.
So Marta is from a very, very wealthy family in Venezuela, and she came up to Boston to get a degree in sociology from Tufts University. And because of some paperwork mistakes, she ends up getting deported in absentia. And by the time she discovers this, ICE is out there looking for her. And she can't be deported because Maduro had killed her father and her brother, and her mother and sisters went into hiding, and if she goes back there, she will be killed. So she takes up residence in a storage unit, pays Rose under the table, and is working on her doctoral dissertation, which is on the race of life. And the race of life is actually a real thing. I saw it as a video in graduate school, but now it's on YouTube. I mean, you can just call it the race of life. And what it is, would be as if everybody in this room lined up to run a race across the street. Whoever gets there first wins $100. But before the race starts, you have to respond to a series of statements. If you respond true, then you take 2 steps forward. If you don't, if it's not true, you stay where you are. The statements are things like, your mother went to college. You had more than 25 books in your house growing up. You never had to help pay the rent or the electricity. You felt safe walking in your neighborhood as a kid. And there are like 20 of these. And so before the race even starts, you have a kind of pyramid that doesn't mean that somebody who's at the back of the group can't run really fast and win. And it doesn't mean that somebody at the front can't stumble and lose. It just means that the starting line is not the same for all of us, which is something that, Americans don't like to think. It's that whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing, but some people's bootstraps are a little bit higher than others.
I thought you did that so beautifully in the book too. I found myself, after I finished the book, I found myself thinking about that concept.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, that was a really good point, and something I really hadn't read in other books about.
That was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, to get people to think about this, but to do it in a way where it's a thriller, so it's not like that's the thing. So anyway, Marta does have a lot of similarities to me, except I'm not illegal.
Well, we can come back to Metropolis. I'm sure you have other questions later, but I am a big fan of your art thrillers. Those are so much fun, and I've read them all. So tell us a little bit about the research you did for those. How did you get to be such an expert in that territory?
Well, first of all, when you go to graduate school, particularly in a field like sociology, you learn how to research. And so the most fun thing about writing novels and doing research for them is that if you're an academic, I'm sure there are some here tonight, if you're an academic, you have to research every single last person who has even breathed on their subject. And, there's the endnotes and the footnotes and all of this stuff. But when you do research for a novel, you just do it until you're not interested anymore, and then you make the rest of it up. So it's just perfect. It's just so much fun. I also like, they say that you should write what you know. Well, this is my 9th published novel, my 14th. And I ran out of what I know a long time ago. So I like to write what I want to learn about. And my first art thriller was The Art Forger. I didn't know any, I mean, I had actually, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be an artist. But it became clear really early on. This is not where my talents were. So I'm an art appreciator. I travel a lot, and the first place that I go is the museum. And so I had just moved into the city of Boston, and there are great museums and lots of galleries and lots of artists. And I thought, oh, this could be really fun to learn more about this. That book is about oil painting and about the Impressionists. When I started, I didn't even know that oil paints, you had to paint a layer and let it dry and then paint another layer. I mean, this is how little I knew about art. But I found some artists and they let me sit and follow them. You know, I would sit in their studios and take notes, and they would explain to me what it was that they were doing. So I did that with 3 or 4 different artists.
Did you have the story in your head as you were doing that?
Yes and no. You know, it was kind of there, but I was also, you know, this is a really good way to research, is to start, you know, and to see it. There also are gallery owners. Gallery factors very large in that story. And so I went to a couple of galleries and talked to the gallery owners to find out what it was like. Then I did tons of research on painting and on forgery. So that was really fascinating. All the details of what forgers do and how they do it, and that was just really fun. And then Isabella Stewart Gardner is a real person, and there was a real heist at her museum in 1990. And it still has not been solved, so I did a lot of research into that, and then I did a lot of research into Degas, because he's a character. So in all of these books, I have fictional characters interacting with actual characters. So in the Muralist, it's about the abstract expressionists, and so Mark Rothko, Jackson Pollock, Lee Krasner, Willem de Kooning, Eleanor Roosevelt, and are all actual people that my fictional characters interact with. In The Collector's Apprentice, Matisse is having an affair with my protagonist. And the Muralist, Mark Rothko is having an affair. And people, with my protagonist, and people say, well, you know, aren't they going to sue you? What does the family think about this? I'm like, okay, they're going to sue me for saying their parent had an affair with an imaginary woman. Okay. But in the case of both Matisse and Rothko, I made sure that they had multiple affairs. Yeah, right. Who's going to say?
So there's a little bit, there's art in the Metropolis, but it's not kind of a central component. Are you going to come back to art in your next book or books?
Yeah, but also in a very different way. I'm working on a novel that is, and it's kind of a legal thriller and a mystery, psychological suspense, and it's about a woman who has multiple personality disorder, and they're all artists. And each one works in a different medium. And one of the characters is an art therapist and a forensic psychologist. So she's working with them because this woman has been accused of murder. And she says she wasn't there, she didn't do it, she doesn't know the guy. But the truth is, she doesn't. So,
You were saying that's about a couple years out?
yeah. Well, I'm on tour now, and I keep thinking I'm gonna write really slowly so I don't have to do this too soon. I love this.
Yeah.
This I love.
With the travel?
Oh, the travel is miserable. The airlines, the airport. Today, we sat on the tarmac for an hour because they didn't have a pilot and they had to fly in from New York. It's like, you didn't know this? You put us on the plane and then you tell us we don't have a pilot? It's like, and this isn't the first time something like that has happened. So, aside from that, this is all about beam you up.
Yeah.
Anything
Oh,
like
that would happen.
that.
So the Muralist, I loved all those books, but that one talked about the European refugees to the building
Yeah.
before World War II. Talk to us about your family history and where that came from.
So, the Muralist takes place in 1939, and it takes place in New York. And I had always wanted to write a Holocaust book, but most of my family wasn't involved. Almost all of my family came over at the turn of the century, and they weren't there. And there's so many Holocaust books that have been written, and I just didn't feel it was my story to tell. You know, I have an uncle who was a survivor, and he ended up coming over here. This is the story that the Race of Life disputes. So he came over here, poor, not speaking English, you know, and he was a major real estate developer who ended up with hundreds of millions of dollars. And he didn't know what happened to most of his family. So he hired an Israeli scholar to find out what happened to all of his relatives. And then he took 15 family members, including myself, and the Israeli scholar on a tour where we followed each branch of the family through the concentration camps and other stuff like that. So that was sitting in the back of my head. And when I started working on the Muralist and started doing some historical research, I realized that there was a story about America before World War II, when we didn't want to get involved in the war, and and there was this horrible man named Breckinridge Long who was secretary in Roosevelt's administration, and he controlled the immigration, and he was a huge anti-Semite. And I thought, wow, here's a story I can tell, because it's the American part of the story. And Eleanor Roosevelt was already a character because she was very involved in the WPA, where Rothko and Pollock and Krasner all worked. And so I decided to do that and incorporate that political moment and incorporate my fictional character and my real characters in what was going on. And Eleanor is a viewpoint character, and Franklin is a character. And she said on her deathbed, she told her son her greatest regret in life was that she hadn't forced Franklin to let more Jews in before World War II, because they knew what was going on. So that's probably my most serious book.
Yeah.
Even though it still has a lot of the, all these young, crazy painters, young and dumb and broke, working for the WPA, jumping in and out of each other's beds and getting drunk and smoking pot. So there are some lighter moments.
Well, here's a process question. In Metropolis, you do the thing where you go back and forth in time, and I think your other books, I'm not remembering it too correctly right now, but I think that happens. So why do you like to do that, and what do you think that accomplishes?
Well, the first three books, they did jump around in time a lot. Two of them from the present to one past point. And in The Collector's Apprentice, it takes place it completely in the past, but it jumps around to three different time periods in the past. I really like writing from a number of different viewpoints, and I really like in terms of story. So, you know, in any historical moment, there are different stories going on, and each character has their own story. And then in my books, I weave them all together. And so when you jump around in time, or when you jump around in voice, the reader is caught up in it. And you can end a chapter, one person with a little bit of a question, and then you switch to the next person, and that ends up with a little bit of question. And then, like in Metropolis, these characters start interacting with each other, so that one story feeds into another person's story, feeds into another person's story, as all the different people start getting connected. And it's just really fun, and it fits with my obsessive statistical way of writing books with my multicolored file cards and all.
So do you do like a spreadsheet, or do you do
No, I
like
do
cards,
it all.
or what do you do?
I do it
You
all.
know, oh my gosh.
I do it all. I think I talked about this at the museum. So anybody who heard me, bear with me. So basically every plot follows a normal curve. This is true of main plots, subplots, and character arcs. So I create a chart, and on the bottom axis is time, and on the left axis is what's going on in their story.
Plot points.
Right,
Yeah.
it's a major plot points. So I do one for the main story. I do one, each of my books has a romantic subplot. I do it for each character, and I figure out what each of the plot points are. And then I do, this is very helpful with Metropolis. I do bubblograms to figure out the relationships between the characters
Oh, okay.
over time. So with Metropolis at the beginning, these characters knew each other, and then I did another bubblegram in the middle who knew each other, and then at the end to figure out how to make sure those connections were going through. And then I take all of this and I have a stack of multicolored file cards. And so in Metropolis, there's the main plot about what happened when somebody falls down the elevator shaft. And then there's Zach's plot, who owns the building, is an ex-drug dealer, and he bought the building to launder his money to get straight. And then because of the elevator incident, this is all thrown apart. So he has his arc. And then there's Rose, who's taking the money under the table because she has a very, very wayward teenage son, and she's trying to keep him out of trouble. And she's taking the money to get him to play football. You know, and it doesn't. I know it doesn't work. It doesn't come out. And then Marta, who I told you about, and then there's Jason, who has his office. He used to be this big mucky-muck in a big firm, and then he did the right thing for the wrong reasons, and now his office is in a self-storage unit. There's Liddy, who is an abused wife, very, very wealthy, living in a penthouse of one of the most expensive buildings in Boston, and she finally snaps, so her husband forced her to move into Boston. She didn't want to sell their house, and he wouldn't let her bring any of her kids' stuff. He said, the kids are done, it's just us. He ships the kids off to Switzerland to go to school. And she takes the kids' stuff without him knowing it, rents a unit, and sets it up like the kids' rooms. So there are desks, and they have their cork boards and all of this. And then, then it snaps, and her story continues on. So each one of these has it. And so I take, so the pink cards, I take all of Liddy's plot points. And the yellow cards, Serge's plot points. He's the street photographer, he factors in. And then each one has a different color. And then I end up with a stack this big of all the different colors. And then I put them out on my dining room table and move them around to try to get them to work. And then I take one act, because it's set up on a 4-act structure, because that's the structure of the normal chronicle. And then I write from that, but that's the first draft. And then it just changes.
So when you get the book published, you take all those cards, and throw them up in the air?
Oh,
Not really? Keep them?
I keep them.
Okay.
This is something that I'm sure every writer would tell you, that we keep all kinds
Keep
of
everything.
stuff, you know.
Gotta rent a room and
Yeah, right, that's what I'm gonna have to do. It's true, yeah, you can talk to my husband for my notes and my books.
So just a few more questions, and then I guess we can turn it over to some other questions. What do you like to read? What kind of, what genre, what authors, what are your favorite things to read?
I don't, it's always such a hard question. I have,
know.
you know, so I have some favorite authors who I read, who are just standing there in front of the bestseller books over there. So I love Elizabeth Strout.
Oh, me
She might
too,
be
yeah.
one of my favorite all-time writers. I love Richard Russo. Richard Ford I've been reading recently. I'm in 3 book groups and take a literature class.
Oh my gosh.
So
You got
those are the
stacks
books.
this high
Yeah.
on your
Well,
nightstand.
you know, it's interesting because all of them go with certain types of books. You know, like not you know, like readable literary fiction. I guess is what I like and what book groups are doing. And although I'm reading a great book now called the love story of W. Du Bois. I just started it. It's just really, if anybody has read Homegoing, it reminds me of that. It's just, and it's beautifully written and fascinating and a real page turner. That's really good.
So you live in Boston and where in Florida?
Naples, Florida.
And
on the West
so
Coast.
tell us a little bit about your family.
We just had our 40th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you, it's a long time.
I just had mine.
Yeah, congratulations. And I have a daughter who is 38 and a son who is 35. And 2 beautiful little girls, grandchildren. Unfortunately, my son lives in LA, he's a film guy, and my daughter lives in Pensacola, Florida, which is such a weird place for a Boston-bred, democratic, liberal Jewish woman.
She can start turning things
So
around.
she, yeah, it was, when she got married, her husband was an attorney, and that was where he was from, and that's where his first job was. Now she's gotten rid of the husband, but she's still in Pensacola. Damn.
Do you have any Ohio or Columbus connections?
I do.
Yeah.
I went to Ohio University.
Oh,
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Did you party there? Sorry, that was rude.
No, it wasn't rude, because I will tell you, I not only partied there, I got kicked out. It was a wild time. We had so much fun, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. See why I like the BA?
That's great. Great.
But I did end up going back and graduating.
Good for you.
Oh, that's
Cool.
cool.
I did not know that about you.
Not that many, I don't usually do my wild days at OU.
So how did you connect with Linda Cass?
She reconnected from the Collector's Apprentice.
Yes.
You know, and I'm ready to come back to Linda anytime.
I saw Barbara.
Should we open it up to
Sure,
questions
sure.
now for anybody else? Have anything we want to ask BA? Barbara, no.
So I heard you speak before, and I love hearing you talk about your process because I think it's fascinating. But it occurred to me tonight while I was listening you speak about it that your process sounds to me very visual. And it's kind of interesting that you spend all this time writing about painting and visual art because I think of writing as being very, I'm a visual person, I'm an artist, and so it's really interesting to hear me think of it in that way, like that you have to like literally kind of physically see it.
Yeah, because I'm a very visual person, and I need to see it. So another thing that I did that I forgot to mention is that I make tension charts of every scene, and I give each scene a tension coefficient. So if there's a scene that's kind of, you know, you can't have a scene with 0, but sometimes you're building something up, or you've had a big scene, you want to give the reader a little bit of a break, so that gets the coefficient of 0.25. If there's more going on, like in Metropolis, a couple of people are connecting, 0.50. Once you get 5 people connecting and all kinds of them, 0.75. And if it's a really, really big scene, it gets the big 1.0. And that corresponds back to the normal curve, which are the 4 acts. And then I take graph paper and I graph it so that I can see where the tension is. It's like, so if there's like a bunch of scenes that are flat, I know that I have to introduce some tension. Or if there's a whole bunch that are really high, I know I have to like break that down a little bit. So it's a very visual, and when I'm writing, I see what I write. I'm very visual. I'm not that
Like a movie?
auditory.
Do you see like a movie?
Yeah,
or something?
kind of, you know, so it's, you know, I think that all senses are involved in so many different things. Like when you're, I don't know if you're a painter, but you're seeing it, but you're also smelling it and reliving what you saw or whatever it is. So there's all kinds of different things, and I would think that also touch is important for painting.
I'm just blown away by your process, but in the community of writers that you know, do you know anybody else that works like that?
No.
Yeah.
Most of my writing buddies just, you know, they
Do they know
just laugh.
how you do
Oh,
it?
yeah. Like everybody knows, and they just laugh, you know, it's like, okay, there she goes again, they make fun of my multicolored file card. Like, okay, Barbara's got her cards.
Great. Anybody else?
How long does it take you from the moment you come up with the idea to, and with all the process that you have to get to finish that first draft?
Usually the first draft takes me a year to 18 months. And then I spend the next 3 years rewriting it. So I would say every page of this has been rewritten at least 20 times.
Wow.
And I have done at least 10 full drafts, which means I have 10 different tension charts, and I go through when I get stuck, I pull out the file cards and move them around again. There's so many aspects that you need to deal with in writing a novel. You know, you have your characters, you have your plot, you have your theme, you've got your environment, you've got your words, and unless you're a genius, which I am not, you can't do it all at one time. I mean, there's just, I mean, Dickens did it. How he did that, I don't know. He was writing serials. I guess he had to keep his family fed, but still, so he was. So it just, and it's a very iterative process, and like I said, I read it, and screen, I do, you know, and then just go over and over. My husband finds it amusing as I'm sitting there for the 10th time reading the book. That's why I say, any good? I don't know.
So do you have a first reader? Is he your first reader?
He is actually, so he's he's an incredible line editor, and he's really good, and we do brainstorm ideas at the living room, at the kitchen table, but I've been in writers groups from when I first started writing, and we had a very successful writers group. There were 4 of us. Now there are only 2 of us, but she and I write our novels together. And we critique everything, we brainstorm, we keep going over and over. So she's kind of my first reader. Then I do a bunch of drafts, and then I have a number of novelist friends, and we swap manuscripts,
Oh, nice.
you know, and then give each other feedback.
Any names we'd recognize?
Well, Jan Brogan is the closest one. Chris Castellani, Gary Braver, Hallie Efron, you know. So anyway, there's, you know, and we work on Darn Trip, Jessica Keener. So we work on each other's books. And then there's my editor. You know, and I go back and forth with her another 3 times. And then when they go to publish it, then you've got like 5 different sets of editors who go through that too. And by the time it's over, it's like, get this away from me. I am done.
Another question?
Do you think that your graphing of the tension, you know, you didn't really ever have anything less than a 0.75 in this one?
Thank you.
Because you started connecting, every character had his or her own tension, and it was a mess. I mean, you know, and so that's what I thought it was so great, you know, because you didn't really get a rest period, you know, unless you put the book down and came back the next day, which I thought. But so you don't really think you went from 0.25 and this one to 1, do you?
Well, really, the character stuff came from the normal curves. You know, the tension stuff I do as I'm writing. So I finish a scene and I put what I think the tension is down in the chart, which also has the chapter, the characters, the location, the number of pages. This chart. So it's just a crazy way to write.
Have you sold film rights to any of your novels?
Yes and no. We've had options that then have been dropped, but The Art Forger is being made into a musical. It is, you know, this woman has been working on it for 3 years. She optioned it for no money because why? Who else is going to want to make a musical? Art Forger. And she's done a fantastic job. And they did a table read with all of the actors, and they, you know, they put it on. I don't know what it was, but anyway, they streamed it, and I got to watch it, and like, oh, these people singing your words. We were just, you know, it's really good. So now she's trying to get money. She's got her pitch deck ready and all of this kind of stuff. So we'll see, but it's very funny.
That's great. I love that in Metropolis that the characters, they were flawed, but they weren't really bad people. They were like, with a couple minor exceptions, there really wasn't a terrible villain in that story. And I thought that was one of the things that I just really enjoyed about it. These are real people.
Yeah, well, this is, you know, we're all nobody's all good and all bad, you know, and, they actually were much more flawed.
Were they,
They
you toned
were.
them down?
Well, my editor and publisher didn't like some of their big, because you have this pressure to make people likable. I just hate this, you know, it's like, I don't want everybody to be likable, and I don't want anybody to be totally likable, you know, it's,
Marta was pretty close. She was
yeah,
totally,
yeah,
pretty
yeah, she was,
totally
yeah,
likable.
I do
And
have
I
a
like it
soft spot
that
for her.
she's your, kind of your alter ego.
Yeah, Serge is a good guy.
Yes, Serge is a good guy.
How much traveling do you do when you have a new book come out like this?
Well, I'm on tour now,
What does that
and
mean?
it is much shorter than my last tours. You know, the COVID stuff and, you know, as we were talking about, the publishers really liked all the Zoom stuff because they didn't have to pay to do it.
Yeah.
So there's still some of that, but like this tour, so in the next 6 weeks, I think I have, I don't know, 20,
Oh my God.
25.
Where all are you
25
going?
days. Well, I did a couple in Boston, then I was up in Maine, then I was in DC, then I was in Maryland, then I came here, I'm going to Chicago tomorrow, then I'm going to the Cape, then I have a couple of events in Connecticut, holiday area, and then I'm going on another larger tour to Atlanta, Raleigh, North Carolina, 4 places in Florida. So anyway, it's, as I said, I love this part. Airports, not so much.
Well, thank you so,
Thank you.
so much. This is beautiful. As we promised, we're going to be giving away a signed, so it'll be signed afterwards, a copy of the Art Forger. So I'm going to pick the winner here. There we go. Christine Blackwell.
All right.
Couldn't you pick a different one?
So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Barbara and Nancy. This was wonderful.
It was so much fun to talk to you.
We expect you back for the next book. It's incredible. As a writer, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it all wrong. But anyway, it was fascinating, fascinating. So Barbara will be signing copies at the table, and thank you so much for coming. We're open every day, 7 days a week, 10 to 6. We have curbside pickup, we have shipping, you can order online. Just keep coming and visiting. Thank you.